everybody. It is Wednesday the 25th of October. You find me once again down at St Helens Wharf. I'm a little way along from the church, which is over in that direction. I'm standing at the far end, up near the canal bridge where the Ock meets the River Thames. I've come down here because there are a few buildings that I want to talk about today. My intention is to take you on a mini pub crawl around some of the more intriguing public houses in Abingdon. And I thought I'd start down at St Helens Wharf because there is an old pub here with an old name, which isn't all it cracks up to be. So I will just turn the camera around. What you can see across the road is the Old Anchor pub. The Old Anchor Inn, and it's a Moorlands pub, which is now part of the Green King chain. Green King bought out Moorlands more than 30 years ago. I think I've mentioned in a previous podcast, and closed the brewery in Abingdon, but the brand name still lives on. The Old Anchor Inn was originally not on that side of the road. It was originally on this side of the road at the far end where the trees are. It was demolished from there and moved over here by Christ's Hospital, which owns the land down along this part of St Helens Wharf, and it replaced 3 17th century houses that were on that site. And the framework for those are apparently still visible at the back of the pub, though obviously we don't have access to that. That's in the domestic area of the pub. But there are also almshouses which are still used alongside the pub. So these almshouses are operated by Christ's Hospital. So the Old Anchor Inn is actually the new Anchor Inn, and I've mentioned before this is a location for one of the troops of Morris men to meet. Whether they actually practice their dances here, I don't know, but I've certainly seen them come in for their fun, the fun part of being a Morris dancer, which seems to be the social aspect. And as we move along, you can see the long alley almshouses. We've filmed from the other side in St Helens, and then the brick alley almshouses. So I'll just cross the road and we'll go back into St Helens Churchyard, because there are a couple of little things I want to show in there that I didn't mention previously. And I was told off by Bob and Wendy for not mentioning one of these things because it's a significant little item. So when St Helens Church had its new organ installed in the 1920s, they needed to have some way of creating the air to go through the organ, and so they had a bellows room, a blowing room, built in the grounds of the church. And in order to help it to blend in, it was deliberately styled in the same style as the existing brick alley almshouses that stand just behind it. So this is the blowing room for the church organ inside St Helens Church, with, as you can see, the brick alley almshouses behind. And there's just a couple of other little things I thought I'd show you from the outside of the church, which I didn't mention previously. So on the west porch here, there are 4 figures at the very top. There is an eagle, an ox on that side, which I think you can see. And then as we come around this side, you'll see that there is a lion and a man. And these historically are the symbols of the 4 evangelists, the 4 writers of the gospel. And the different creatures are thought to embody the spirit of those Gospels. And then above the doorway is a small statue of St Helen, and we can see it's St Helen for the 2 devices that she's holding in either hand. She has a cross in one hand and a church in the other hand. She has the church she holds the church because she was the founder of many churches, and of course is the patron saint of this particular church. And she holds the cross because she is credited with having discovered the remains of the true cross. When her son Constantine became emperor, she went, and she herself was already a Christian, she went to the Holy Land and investigated lots of the holy sites there, and is credited with having found a number of ancient artifacts and a number of ancient sites like the site of the Holy Sepulchre and so on. And of course it was her son Constantine that made Christianity the official language, the official religion rather, of the Roman Empire. And then I thought I'd just show you this little porch on the side of the building here. And this porch was built by the Fraternity of the Holy Cross. And above the entrance door, if I can tip up far enough, yes, there we are, you'll see that there is a cross in the middle, a crucifix with Mary and St. John on either side. And unusually for a part of a church, that actually has a room above the porch where the guild, the fraternity would meet and have its discussions. But on the left-hand side was a small dwelling for one of the many priests who were supported when this was a thriving parish. And you can see the evidence of that from the chimney stack above the window. So I'll move up now towards another part of town and show you some more of the pubs. So I'm up here now at the top of East St Helens Street and outside the King's Head and Bell. Now, to an English person, the King's Head as a pub name immediately makes you think of Charles I, who was the king during the mid-17th century and the English Civil War, whom Oliver Cromwell defeated in battle and who was then tried and executed as a traitor. Charles I was known to have visited Abingdon on many occasions before and during the Civil War, and Abingdon was itself a royalist stronghold, as was Oxford and places like Farringdon. This was very much a royalist area of the country, Berkshire and Oxfordshire. At that time, this pub would have been known as the Bell, or the Old Bell. And it appears that the King's Head has been added to the title of this coaching inn simply to give it kudos because of the known association of Charles I with Abingdon. In fact, the King stayed at Barton Court, which had been Barton Farm, which was the home farm of Abingdon Abbey and the oldest part of the town, and had been a guest there on a number of occasions before ultimately he was defeated, captured, tried and executed. And in fact, the last time he saw his queen, Henrietta Maria, was at Barton Court. The King's Head part of the name was only added in the 18th century, and when the inn was remodelled at the end of the 19th century, it had lost the King's Head part and had become the Old Bell. Subsequently, it was remodelled again in the mid-20th century, which is the current layout of the pub, and the King's Head was reinstated, as it were. At the time of its building in the 17th century, it would have had stabling for about 30 horses in the back, but these are now guest rooms and saloon bars and seating areas at the back of the pub. Right, well, I'm down on Bridge Street now, and just ahead on the left is another pub called the Broadface. And from the sign, it looks like it's a jolly, jovial, thick-set fellow who is the origin of the name of this pub. Unfortunately, the truth could not be more remote from such an idea, but I'll come to the reason why it's called the Broadface in a moment. Across the road is the old county police station. The county police station was built in the 1850s and provided accommodation for a superintendent and a sergeant, plus their families, and stabling for their horses at the back. And deep in the bowels of the police station are 3 cells in which prisoners could be held. This building is at the moment undergoing planning permission for redevelopment into a living accommodation, but the hope is that there'll be some sensitivity towards its historic purpose here in the town. And just behind the police station is Abingdon Jail, which actually predates the police station by about 50 years. The jail was built by Napoleonic prisoners of war in about 1805, and there has long been a rumour of a ghost of an 8-year-old boy who was executed at the prison. However, this, leaving aside whether or not one believes in ghosts, the rumour is completely unfounded, in the sense that, unfortunately, Abingdon does hold the record for having executed the youngest person in Britain, which was an 8-year-old boy named John Dean, but the execution occurred in 1629, probably not very far from the site of the jail. And that brings me back to the Broadface pub. I'll just walk down to the other side. It might be a bit quieter away from the road traffic, but it'll give you a chance to see the pub. It's a very nice pub. It's got very good beers and very good food, and has live music, and is really a very nice place to go. But this location on the edge of the town, as it was in the medieval period, unfortunately, the jail across the road that would have been here before the jail that we now have was the site of executions. And the broad face is in fact most likely to refer to the fact that when a man is strangled to death by a rope, rather than having his neck broken as modern executions with ropes would have, the face becomes very swollen. As I say, it's not a particularly attractive origin for the name, and you'll see on the side of the pub that there are several possible derivations of the broad face. It is the likeliest that it actually has to do with the executions that took place here. Well, you find me once again down in Sturt Street, and before I go on with my little pub tour, I should mention that the little stream, really, that we crossed over around the Motte and Bailey yesterday at Abingdon Castle is actually the River Sturt, which flows under these buildings and out into the Thames, down by the river, down by the bridge, rather, over the river. So I'm in Sturt Street, and across the road from me is number 3 Sturt Street. And as you can see from the rather uneven floor line of the first floor, in the US, second floor of the building opposite, this is a fairly ancient building. Pardon my buses as they go through, but it's nice to see that the buses are running on time, so that's not a bad thing. The current building was refurbished not that long ago, and it was discovered that in fact the building wasn't straight down the front, but actually has this overhang over the door, that the upper floor is slightly protruding out in the style of medieval buildings, and this in fact was one of the buildings that belonged to the abbey, and it's in the one of the cartularies from the late 15th century as an abbey building. So we know that a building of this type was on this location at that time. Obviously, there will be aspects of this building which are probably part of that building, and then there will be much newer parts that have been added subsequently. The reason for including this on my pub crawl is that this building has at various times, I really don't like it when large lorries come through the town centre. This building has at previous times in the 18th, 19th and early 20th century been a public house and was known most commonly as the Golden Cross, presumably because of its close proximity to St Nicholas's Church, just 2 doors along. So I hope you've enjoyed this little pub crawl of Abingdon, and I hope it's inspired you to perhaps have a look at your own familiar buildings in your own town and to learn a little bit more about the history of why things are the way they are and why things are called what they're called. And until tomorrow, I will wish you, I hope you enjoyed rather the rest of your evening, and I will speak with you again then. So until then, bye bye.